My name is Sarah, and today I will be doing a book review on a very interesting story. Something I really did not learn in school. Today's book is Stalin's Daughter, The Extraordinary and Tumultuous Life of Svetlana Allalieva by Rosemary Sullivan. I will have to say about this book, I was like, wow. That's all I have to say about this book. It's just like, wow. The story is, of course, about the daughter of Stalin, from when she was a little girl to defecting to America and to her death. And I believe it was November 22nd, 2011. So, since this is an actual events that actually happened, I will not be rating this like if it was a fictional book. This actually happened, and it was a great learning. And I am surprised that I did not know any of this stuff while in school. A little something about the school system. So, I will get straight into spoilers. This is a big book. It has to do with Svetlana's, like I said, for her entire life. So that was really interesting. It starts off with her in Russia as a little girl. Her father, of course, was Joseph Stalin, and her mother it was Nadia Allalieva. She had two brothers, a half brother named Yakov, who is from Stalin's first marriage, and her older brother, this middle child, Vasily. Yes. So, it was said that Nadia committed suicide, and at the time, Svetlana didn't know what that meant as a child because she was 6.5, and she just thought her mother was away on a trip and stuff. So, I would have to say that as a child, like as a little girl, Svetlana and Stalin did have, say, a relationship, as a father-daughter relationship, because he was like the father figure, the only parent she had, and she would always go to him. I mean, she would give him her daily report cards. He would read over them. She would go to him, and he would give her kisses and stuff. And as like, there were pictures in this book. It's like, if you did not know who this man was, you would think that he was just an ordinary father that cared about his daughter. And so Svetlana grew up with a lot of family members, especially her grandparents on her mother's side, whose names were Olga and Sergei. And of course, she was surrounded by Stalin's inner circle members, and in a way, she developed some of Stalin's personalities, not the ones I'm talking about that got a lot of people killed, but like a strong-willed way. Because the one time she asked something, he said, never ask command. And so, as a little girl, they would play this little game where she would say, first secretary, I command you to take me here, and he would reply. So it's like a cute little game, but in a way, he was teaching her authority in a world that he was controlling, and in a way, she learned how to speak up for herself, in a way. So Svetlana did not know that her father was actually in control of all of Russia, because she just never knew. She was like a little girl, and she loved her father. Her and her older brother Yakov had a strong relationship. Vasily, he knew what the last name Stalin meant, so he tried to get away with some of the stuff in school, saying, I'm the son of Stalin, I'm a Stalin. But even Stalin was like, treat him like a student who's misbehaving, so discipline him. As though Svetlana got older, as a teenager, you want to, do things that your parents think aren't proper. So, like, Stalin would disapprove of what she was dressing like. He would say, wear something less less showing, more concealing. But she was like, no, I'm gonna wear something else. And it was during World War II that she found out what really happened to her mother. Like, she didn't know what she knew about the war, but she wanted to be with her father in a way. And so there was a time she did go see Stalin during the war. And at the time, America was printing things about the Russians, including Stalin, and they said in the Times magazine what happened to Svetlana's mother. Well, no one really talked about what happened to Nadia, how she committed suicide. So in a way, Svetlana felt a little betrayed about that. And she started getting glimpses of her father's power as she grew up. Like, we're talking about a little girl in elementary school. All of a sudden, she has a bodyguard, right? And she has little school friends that start disappearing. Well, that's because their parents were considered, traitors to the state. And in doing so, if you have one member, say your father, then not only were you taken out of the school, but then you were also arrested as well for being of association. So she knows that was going on. And what also helped her realize this was, one, that people would be giving their children letters so she can give them to her father, which she got furious about. The thing that woke up Svetlana about her father was that as a 16-year-old, she had a crush. She was in love with an older man named Alexei Kepler. He was a womanizer, but they had a fling going on and so forth. And the bodyguard was around, so he would report to Stalin. Well, one night, Kepler got a call saying, "Stop it." But he said, quote, "Go to hell." And then he was sent to the gulag. And then Svetlana realized that her father's power, voice, whatever he said, was everything. So, and as she got older and so forth, she realized that her family started disappearing because Stalin would believe that they were part of some conspiracy or so forth. It's like this huge family that Svetlana had of the Alaluevas and of Stalin's first wife, whose name was, I am very thankful for this book for having a big family tree. I really can't. The Svanitse, I believe that's how you pronounce it, the Svanitse, that was Yakov's mother's side. They were with Svetlana as she grew up, and then she just noticed how family members were disappearing all the time. Either some disappeared and she found out they were executed, or they were put in solitary confinement for years. And it's like, the one thing that Svetlana could never forgive her father was the death of her older brother Yakov, because during the war, Stalin had a rule saying those who were captured are traitors to Russia, and they will be executed if they ever try to come back. And so Yakov, he was captured by the Germans during the war, and of course his wife was arrested because her husband was captured by the enemy. And it was believed that Yakov died in a German camp because Stalin would not trade his son for a German general. But how he put it was that why should he save his son when other sons were being taken? Excuse me. Sorry about that. I got a little dry throat. So that was the death of Yakov, who died in a German prison camp, was one thing that Svetlana could not forgive her father on. So Svetlana did have 3 marriages in Russia. One was to the Russian, I have these names written down, Grigory Morozov. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing any of these names wrong. And Stalin did not acknowledge the marriage because Grigory was Jewish, and Stalin wasn't okay with that. But they had a son named Joseph, and both of his grandfathers were named Joseph, so Stalin didn't like that either. But the one time, excuse me, the one time that, I swear this weather's getting to me. The one time that Joseph did meet his grandson, Joseph, Svetlana was worried because her son was half Jewish. But the greeting went okay. Surprisingly, Joseph was happy about his grandson. But they did divorce. The second marriage was actually an arranged marriage to Yuri Sidonov. I really don't know how to pronounce his name. I am so sorry. And in that marriage, they had a daughter named Katya. It's nicknamed Katya. And it was an alright arranged marriage. It's just it didn't last long. And at the time, Stalin and Svetlana had drifted apart in a way. But when she go ask for a divorce this time, unlike before where it was like hush hush, Stalin approved the divorce. He actually got dressed up and everything, and he was like, after not seeing his daughter for some time, look, I got all cleaned up for you, my daughter. It's like, are you sure you want to go with this divorce? And she said yes. And he permitted it. So, the third marriage, it didn't last that long, actually. It was like a marriage on a whim. And that was to, Ivan Svanidze. He was like a distant cousin of Svetlana on Yakov's mother's side. He was also in the gulag for a while. And she kind of saw like a broken spirit in him, and she could relate to it. But it was like I said, a marriage on a whim. In the 50s, Joseph Stalin died. Svetlana was there, but he was surrounded by his circle, what was part of the circle. And at the time, there was a situation in Russia called the Doctor's Plot, where all of these doctors that were thought of conspiring were arrested. So those who could help Stalin were actually in jail. And so when he died, the vacuum of power happened. And people were keeping an eye on Svetlana, just wondering what would happen. She did fall in love with him, and she wanted to get married to this man, but the state would not allow her. That was because he was Indian. This man's name was Brajesh Singh. In a way, he was Indian royalty. And so they both met at like a health resort to get better. They understood each other in a way, and I would say that was what they had was true love. Out of the next marriage and affairs that Svetlana would have and the flings, she actually felt something with this man. Well, he was dying, and she wanted to go to India with him so he could die in his country. Well, at the time, the USSR would not allow people to leave the country. And we're talking about a woman that's not really known how to, in a way, take care of herself. She didn't know the concept of money, which she would learn in America. Either way, when Brajesh died, she wanted to take his ashes to India, and they allowed her to go for a limited time. She went. She saw India. She met Brajesh's family, and they completed the ceremony, spreading his ashes. And in a way, Svetlana seemed happy in India. People were surprised that Stalin's daughter was doing household work, in a way, because they always called her like the Kremlin princess, or the princess of the Kremlin. And that was always amusing, seeing her doing dishes, mopping the floor, and in America, cutting the yard. And people were like, that's Stalin's daughter doing housely things. I would always find that amusing. And so, one day, she just decided to defect. It was in the 60s, and she knew that she would be leaving her children, Joseph and Katya, behind. And she just knew that if she didn't take this chance right then and there, that she would be sent back to Russia, and the only chance of freedom she had would be gone. I am so glad that I do not work with politicians at all. Because the moment she walked into the U.S. Embassy, it was like a game of hot potato. America was freaking out because they had a delicate relationship with the USSR. She flew to Rome before anyone knew that they had left India because they all thought she was still at the airport, but no. And Rome was like, we don't want anyone to know that she is here. And then she was sent to, I believe, Switzerland. Well, that was a fiasco because people thought that Stalin hid away money and that's why she went there. But no, it's just like countries were worried about taking her in because of her last name. I'm like, that would scare the hell out of anyone. Like, no, it's not Stalin, but it's his daughter. So it's like, that was like the massive worldwide game of hot potato. But eventually she did come to America with a manuscript cell. I will leave a link down below of Svetlana's book. It is called 20 Letters to a Friend. So, when I said she didn't understand the concept of money, she also didn't know how lawyers worked and so forth. So she did not know the outlines of how to do business and do her book. But the thing about Svetlana is that she had that iron will of hers that her father, in a way, taught her how to stand up for herself, keep your head held high. And so she was very determined of getting her book sold the way she wrote it. People would suggest things, but she's like, no, I want it written in my way, and so forth. And so when she came to America, she was, in a way, a millionaire because it had gotten sold, and so forth. And again, that was another game of hot potato because Svetlana would stay at multiple people's places. Well, it's been some time in America. People are always looking at her. She has all this money. They think she has the money her father hid away in Switzerland. And so her name, in a way, gets her in a little bit of trouble as well. I would say it's like late 60s or so in America. And Svetlana, she has this thing about, she's paranoid all the time about, because there's times where Soviet spies would steal away defectors and take them back to Russia, so she would always fear that. Svetlana would always move around. Like, she never really settled roots wherever she went. She would always move somewhere. She would rent a new house, or she would buy a new house, and she would just leave. Well, she was invited to Arizona to a compound and by a woman that I swear, this is like a real Norman Bates mother woman. Her name was I am deeply sorry if I'm mispronouncing these names. Olgivana Lloyd Wright. She was in charge of this place, of the Lloyd, I believe, Lloyd Wright compound kind of place of architecture. It's like an architectural place and so forth. And she, in a way, manipulated the times that Svetlana was there because she wanted her to marry her son-in-law, whose name was Wesley Peters, because Svetlana was popular. She had the money, and that's what they were after, the money, because Olga Ivana was used to this type of lifestyle. Well, Svetlana and Wesley marry, and they have another daughter. They have a daughter named Olga. Although Wesley thought that Svetlana named Olga after Olga Ivana because her real name was Olga. She named Olga after her grandmother, Nadia's mother. And I was like, and so that marriage did not last that long. Wesley was always away. Svetlana was paying off his debt, which was draining her money, and also paying for things of Wesley's son for like a future business investment, but it just didn't work. And Olga Ivana just wanted to control Svetlana. This is no. You don't tell a woman born and raised Russian what to do. Because there were some people that were Russian who defected to America. And it's like, they did act American, but they just had this this air about them, I would say, about just doing what they did. Like, they were stubborn, determined people that just knew what to do. Like, we had these people who defected from Russia, and they did what they had to do to survive Stalin. And it's like, people think you have it hard, but these people knew how to tough the rough winds in a way. And so Svetlana would not do what she was told to do, and she left with Olga and got a divorce. What I did forget to mention was that I was very surprised and very interested on a meeting that Svetlana did have. Now, she met this couple, and whose names were Nina and Paul. And you're like, Nina and Paul, okay. But Nina was a surviving Romanov. She and her mother at the time were in England when the Romanovs were overthrown and had lived in exile. And she had married this man named Paul. Well, I am not going to attempt to say this name because I do not want to butcher it. But he was a descendant of the last king of Georgia. Now, in history, you would find out that Nina was a painter and Paul was a writer. Well, their son David, Prince David, would be serving in the U.S. military and would be part of the CIA. So I was like, I would have loved to see how this conversations would have gone between royals and a daughter whose father was a leader of a country, even though he was a dictator. I was like, that would be interesting to sit in and just listen to what they talked about. It's like, I picked up on that conversation. I was like, and we didn't go into further detail. Now, as Olga got older, we also remember that how America saw Russians and how they were afraid of them, right? And Olga never knew that because Svetlana was afraid of telling her daughter who her grandfather was. And I can understand that as any mother would be afraid to tell her child that their grandparent was this evil man that killed a lot of people. But in a way, Olga was name called and stuff, and so Olga was like a very Russian name, so she eventually named herself Chris. And Svetlana was always moving as well, again, so it was kind of hard on the child, but Svetlana didn't want to do wrong by Olga. She in a way, she did what her mother did. She put her child's education as her top priority. That was as much as she can remember of her mother, Nadia. Nadia always wanted her children to have the best education. And so, even though Svetlana really never knew her mother in a way. So, Svetlana eventually found out that England was the best place for privacy. And she could afford at the time the best private school for Olga. So, she made sure that no one knew that they were leaving, because how would America feel if Stalin's daughter left America? They would be, alert the press. And so they went to England. And in a way, Olga made roots there. And, her and Svetlana lived there for quite some time, right? Well, we're getting closer to the 70s. And there were times where people claiming that Joseph, her son, who in a way had been denouncing Svetlana because she believed the KGB was behind that, wanted to see her because he was ill. And so Olga and Svetlana do go to Russia. She does meet her son Joseph. Katya will not see her mother. And it's not the relationship, the family reunion she thought would be. Of course, the Soviet Union has. Stalin saw her back. Yay! Not really. And it's just this reunion that Svetlana's been imagining this whole time. That her son will welcome her back. Just didn't happen. He was remarried, had a son from his first wife. The son's name was Ilya. And it's like, she was worried about him because she knew he was drinking, because she recognized all the signs from her brother Vasily, who died because he was drunk. He died of over drinking. and she knows that stuff too. Um, the one family member that she did was able to relate with was Vasili's son. I believe it was Alexander, and it's like that the child never really had a relationship with his father. It was horrible relationship. But him and Svetlana, they took walks together. They talked, and there's a scene where he said this, that I believe his name was Alexander, please, that he said, quoting here, Brodonsky believed that his father, Vasily, had been weak. He was a product of the people, the freeloaders and leeches who surrounded him. But Svetlana was her father's daughter. She had his organized intelligence and his unbelievable will, but she did not have his evil. That was in a way the only good thing that Stalin taught his daughter, in a way that I don't know if he knew or if he had planned it, but he made his daughter strong. She did not know how to she didn't know how to work the outside world, because in the USSR you weren't allowed to leave Russia. But Svetlana had that, like I would say, that strong-willed determination, and that's what, in a way, was a double-edged sword. It helped her, but it didn't help her in a way. So Svetlana and Olga, they leave Russia again, because first of all, Russia didn't know what to do with Svetlana, so they allowed her to leave, and Olga as well. And at the time, they were back in Georgia, where Stalin lived and where his grandmother lived, and they met people there, but she was worried about Olga as well. And they were able to come back, Olga not exactly finishing school in England, but she would go to England and come to America to visit Svetlana. As time passed on, Svetlana no longer had her money in a way, and she continued to move around. She never exactly knew how to settle down. Her and Olga, their mother-daughter bond was very remarkable in a way. And as the years go by, in 2011, Svetlana's health took a turn for the worst, and I believe November 22nd, 2011, she had passed away. And so, yeah, it was very interesting. I am, like I said, yes, Svetlana died on November 22nd, 2011. I feel really like, as a child, as a person who likes history, who's a student of history, I am surprised I had not heard of Svetlana's death, because I was a senior in high school, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know if no one advertised it as much, maybe like CNN, but as a student in high school, I've never paid attention to the news, and this makes me feel very oblivious as to what happened in life, and I was not really interested in what was going on in the news. I had seen this book at Barnes & Noble's, and not only did the title catch my attention, but this picture as well. There's also pictures in every beginning of a chapter of Svetlana during her life and people that she knew. And I was like, I had never heard of this woman. How come I had never heard of this woman? It was never talked about in high school, of course. It never really went into detail when I took my college classes. But I was like, what was this woman's childhood life? What was her life like with Stalin? So those questions alone had me picking up this book, and I just had to read it. And it's like, it was just about this woman who started out with a great relationship with her father, had an older brother that cared about her second older brother that was just a terrible, who was a mean person after his mother died. She had a loving family. She had a nanny, who I had not mentioned, that was like a mother to her in a way, and she felt very sad when she had passed away. Discovered what her father was like after realizing what was happening to her friends and what happened to Alexei Kepler, and who just decided to one day defect from Russia, took the one chance that she had in India, and went to America. Her way of trying to navigate the American way, because people thought it was strange that a woman who is 45 had a child and was a single mother. It's like, it's not a big thing, no. But I was very interested in this book. Those of you who are interested in Russia, Soviet life, and Stalin, pick this up. Check it out. And it's a very good read. So, my name is Sarah, and bye!